Welcome. Today we are dedicating our session to a very difficult subject. We're going to be doing an extensive exploration of an event that truly shattered the Japanese creative community.
An event that stands as one of the deadliest massacres in the country since the end of the Second World War.
We're talking about the Kyoto Animation arson attack.
It's an incident that really demands careful attention, not just because of its horrific scale, but for the profound impact it had on the culture and, frankly, the security of creative workplaces everywhere.
And this was in July 2019.
That's right. It was the deadliest building fire Japan had seen since 2001, since the Myojo 56 building fire. But what makes this so significant and so tragic
Yes.
is that it's the first massacre of its kind to happen at a studio, a studio tied to an entertainment company, and specifically within the very close-knit world of the Japanese animation industry.
So our purpose today is to carefully walk through the sources we have. We'll try to piece together the background of the studio Kyoto Animation, or KyoAni as many know it.
Right. And then the horrifying details of the 2019 incident itself.
We'll also look at the perpetrator's motive, his legal journey, and of course, the immense aftermath, both globally and in Japan.
And we have to approach this with the utmost sensitivity. We're talking about the memory of the 36 people who lost their lives, their families, and the survivors who are still carrying this weight.
To really understand just how massive this loss was, you first have to understand what KyoAni was, what it represented.
Absolutely. It wasn't just an anime studio.
No.
KyoAni was, and thankfully still is, one of Japan's most acclaimed and beloved production houses. They really cultivated a specific reputation for just exceptionally high-quality animation.
The detail was incredible.
Incredible detail, deeply thoughtful character development, and stories that just resonated emotionally with a huge global audience.
When we talk about their work, we're talking about titles that really define their eras. Things like The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya.
Which was huge. It really helped kickstart that whole light novel adaptation boom.
Right. And then you have these emotional powerhouses like Clannad or the Slice of Life series K-On!, which was massively influential.
And even something totally different like The Absurdity of Nichiju. They had range. But what really set them apart went beyond just the shows they made.
You're talking about their internal structure.
Exactly, their operational structure. And this is so crucial to understanding the scale of the loss, both intellectually and culturally.
How so?
Well, most anime studios in Japan operate on this heavily outsourced model. They rely on a huge pool of freelancers, often underpaid.
But KyoAni was different.
Completely different. They employed the vast majority of their animators, their directors, as full-time salaried staff.
And that changes everything, doesn't it? If a typical studio loses a key person, they can just hire another freelancer. But for KyoAni, that expertise was all internal.
Precisely. This strategy fostered what's called institutional knowledge. It let their staff develop their skills, their artistic voice, over decades, all within the same company.
Which is how they got that consistent quality, that KyoAni look.
That's it. It created a deeply loyal, integrated creative environment. The studio was a career destination, not just a stepping stone. So the attack felt so intensely personal to everyone because it was an attack on a unique, sustainable artistic culture. The people they lost weren't just names on a list. They were decades of institutional memory.
And the specific location they targeted, Studio One, was the heart of that.
It really was. Located in the Fushimi ward of Kyoto, it was a building they constructed back in 2007 for their specific needs.
And this was where the core animation production staff worked.
Yes, the artists, the directors, the people physically drawing and coloring the frames. While the head office was nearby, you could argue Studio One was the real epicenter of their creative energy.
Which brings us to a deeply unsettling part of this story, the context before the attack.
Yes, the sources confirm that the studio was already living under the shadow of repeated threats.
In the year leading up to the attack, they had received over 200 separate death threats.
Over 200, it's an astonishing number.
How did they even begin to handle that level of psychological pressure?
The threats were mostly anonymous, coming in digitally. The company president, Hideaki Hata, he recognized how serious it was. He took the proper steps.
Meaning he went to the police.
He informed both the local police and the company's lawyers. He acknowledged they couldn't be sure if any specific threat was directly linked to what eventually happened, but the sheer volume, it showed a persistent, hostile element focused on them.
That feels entirely justified, a necessary precaution.
It was. And the situation was serious enough that by October 2018, the National Police Agency was informed.
So there was an official response.
There was. It resulted in officers temporarily patrolling the head office and the area around it for a while. Now, those specific patrols might have stopped by July 2019, but the fact is, this organization had been a target for months.
So the attack didn't just happen in a vacuum.
Not at all. It happened against this persistent, toxic background, even if the eventual perpetrator was unknown to them at the time. The sheer volume of those earlier threats. It really highlights this cultural problem of online hostility that can, and sometimes does, boil over into horrific real-world violence.
It sets a very dark stage for what was about to unfold. So let's move to the event itself, July 18, 2019. The details here are chilling. They underscore this. Premeditated intent to cause the maximum possible damage.
The timeline is critical. The attack happened at approximately 10:31 a.m. Japan Standard Time.
Late morning. A time when you'd expect the studio to be full of people, fully operational.
Exactly. The perpetrator, Shinji Alba, he arrived at Studio One carrying a huge amount of highly volatile material. We're talking about 40 liters. That's 11 U.S. gallons of gasoline.
And this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing.
No, this was planned. He'd bought the gasoline 10 kilometers away and transported it on a platform trolley. It shows logistical effort.
The choice of fuel and just the sheer amount of it explains the instantaneous devastation. This wasn't just setting a fire.
No, it was engineered destruction. He chose the front entrance of Studio One specifically to block the main way in and out.
The primary escape route.
Right. And police analysis later concluded that when he spread the gasoline, the vapor mixed with the air on the ground floor. When he ignited it, it wasn't just a fire, it was an immediate explosion right at the entry point. The speed of it was what turned the building into a death trap in an instant.
And there are witness accounts that give this a terrifying personal dimension.
There are. Witnesses heard him shouting, "Die! Shine!" in Japanese as he carried out the attack. And the sources confirm an even more horrific detail.
What's that?
Aoba didn't just ignite the fuel on the floor. He poured gasoline directly over some of the employees before setting them on fire.
Oh my God.
That forced several people already on fire to run out into the street trying to save themselves. Tragically, the perpetrator himself was caught in the blast, which is how he sustained his own severe injuries.
And then the building's own structure became part of the problem. We know about 70 people were inside when it happened.
Yes, and the fire science here is where the tragedy just accelerates exponentially.
Tell us about that.
There was an analysis done by an associate professor at Kyoto University's Disaster Prevention Research Institute.
Tomoaki Nishino.
That's him. His findings were just terrifying. He estimated that the second and third floors were almost completely filled with thick, toxic smoke.
Soot, carbon monoxide.
All of it, within a mere 30 seconds of the explosion.
30 seconds. It's almost impossible to imagine. There's barely enough time to even register what's happening, let alone find a way out.
And that was compounded by this crucial loophole in the safety laws.
We mentioned this earlier, the building's classification.
Right. Because Studio One was legally classified as a small office building, it wasn't required by law to have things like fire sprinklers or indoor fire hydrants.
But just to be clear, it wasn't non-compliant.
No, not at all. It had passed its last fire safety inspection in October 2018 with no issues. But that compliance was irrelevant in the face of this. The fire codes were designed for accidental fires, not for a premeditated mass murder using 40 liters of gasoline.
So the very rules that were meant to keep them safe left them vulnerable to this specific kind of attack. And the most heartbreaking evidence of this was discovered after the fire was put out.
It was. 20 bodies. They were found clustered together on the stairs leading from the third floor up to the roof.
Desperately trying to escape.
It's clear evidence of that. They were trying to get to the one last exit. The roof door was unlocked. It was functional.
Yeah.
But they were overcome by the speed of the fire and the smoke before they could open that final door. It speaks directly to that 30-second window.
The fire itself took a long time to get under control.
It did. It was controlled by about 3:19 p.m. that day, but it wasn't fully extinguished until 6:20 a.m. the next morning. The physical destruction was almost total.
The sources say the vast majority of KyoAni's materials inside Studio One were destroyed. Computers, servers, paper documents.
Years of creative work. Storyboards, character designs, animation files for projects they were actively working on. All gone.
But amid all that destruction, there were these small miracles, small victories. What was saved?
Two things, really. First, a small but really important portion of keyframes, these are the foundational drawings in animation, they were spared just because they happened to be on exhibition somewhere else at the time.
They were physically out of the building.
Exactly. And the second point really speaks to modern data management,
The server.
the server. On July 29th, about a week and a half after the fire, Kyoto announced they'd successfully recovered some digitized original drawings.
From a server that survived the fire.
Yes, somehow it survived the intense heat and the water damage.
Right.
In the face of all that material loss, recovering those digital assets was a small but hugely significant step. It was a silver lining.
Now we have to turn to the immense human cost. This is what truly defines the tragedy.
The final death toll was 36. And it's important to understand how that number was reached.
Initial reports were lower, weren't they?
Yes, initially it was 34. But 2 more people later died in the hospital from their injuries. And then, tragically, another woman died from septic shock in October, months later. That brought the total to 36.
And in addition to the fatalities, 34 other people were injured. That figure includes the perpetrator himself.
Right. And there was some small measure of relief in the reports. By September 2019, all 34 of the injured were no longer in life-threatening condition.
But that doesn't mean they were okay.
Not at all. Many remained in intensive care with just severe long-term burns. It speaks to the brutal nature of their injuries and the incredibly long road to recovery, both physical and psychological.
The autopsies gave a clearer picture of how people died, and it reinforces what you said about the fire science.
It does. The results show that the majority of victims died from their burns, not from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Which is more common in other fires.
Right. This really emphasizes the intense speed and heat of the fire itself. It wasn't a slow, smoldering fire. It was a flash event where the heat itself was instantly lethal.
There's also a stark detail about the demographics of the victims. It speaks directly to Kyoto's unique culture.
This is so central to their story. Kyoto was famous for being progressive. They intentionally hired and trained and championed female animators, giving them better working conditions than was the norm.
So as a direct result of that,
As a direct result, 2/3 of the victims, at least 20 people, were women. It was a tragedy that disproportionately affected female creative talent in the Japanese animation industry.
the process of identifying the victims and then honoring them was painstaking. And it was handled with a great deal of respect, especially given the global media attention.
It was. The nature of the fire meant that some victims were burned beyond recognition. They had to use DNA testing to confirm identities,
That must have been agonizing for the families.
a process that took up to a week, for some, just prolonging that grief and uncertainty.
And the company's president, Hideo Kita, made a really powerful and empathetic decision about their names.
He did. He decided immediately not to release the names of the deceased to the public. He said, releasing their names does nothing to serve the public good. He asked the media not to publish the names out of respect for the family's privacy.
That speaks volumes, prioritizing the human element over the media's hunger for details.
Absolutely. Now, eventually, some families chose to release information themselves, and the police began the formal process of identification. But that initial stance was so important.
And among those confirmed, there were some truly pivotal figures at the studio.
Yes, color designer Naomi Ishida, who was key to their visual identity, and 3 animation directors who were really the cornerstones of the studio's talent: Yasuhiro Takamoto, Yoshiji Kigami, and Futoshi Nishia.
The loss of those 3 alone, it must have been an almost irreplaceable blow.
It was. They represented decades of accumulated knowledge in directing, storyboarding, character animation, all that institutional knowledge we talked about. Losing them meant losing senior mentors, the keepers of the studio's style. The operational disruption was just profound.
A tragedy that cut across the entire artistic team. So let's shift now to the individual responsible, Shinji Oba, and his journey through the medical and legal systems.
Oba was 41 at the time of the attack. He was unemployed, and his background suggests a deep social isolation and mental instability.
What do we know about his history?
High school graduate, some part-time work for the Saitama prefectural government until 1998. The sources note that after his father died, when Oba was 21, he lost contact with his siblings and lived alone. That isolation just grew over time.
And he had a prior criminal record.
He did. In 2012, he was jailed for 3.5 years for a convenience store robbery. He'd used a knife. After serving his time, he spent 6 months in a rehabilitation facility for offenders in 2016. So this points to a long-term pattern.
An inability to function in society.
Or to manage conflict rationally. And his behavior right before the attack showed clear warning signs of his paranoia escalating.
The incident with his neighbor.
Right. Just 4 days before the arson. A neighbor reported Ioba banging on his door, furiously blaming him for noise that was actually coming from a different apartment. He even grabbed the neighbor by the collar.
So he was completely detached from reality.
His delusion was clearly taking over his ability to interact with the world in any rational way.
And the attack itself was not random, it was highly targeted.
Police investigations confirmed that. He traveled to Kyoto 3 days beforehand. He was seen not just at the Studio One site, but also visiting what are called holy sites.
What does that mean?
Real-world locations that were used as settings in Kyoani's anime sound, euphonium.
So he had a deep personal fixation on their work.
An intense fixation. It suggests his delusion was rooted in the content they produced. Only after those visits did he go and buy the gasoline and the trolley for the attack.
And when they apprehended him, not far from the studio, he had severe burns himself. It was then that he first gave his alleged motive.
That's right. As he was being taken to the hospital, he admitted to starting the fire for revenge. He accused the studio of ripping off or plagiarizing his novels. The specific Japanese phrase he used was pakuriyagate.
This claim of plagiarism, it became the central pillar of his motive. What did Kyoani's investigation find?
Well, initially the president denied ever receiving anything from him, but that turned out to be slightly incorrect. The reality, though, was even more damning for Ioba's claim.
So they had received something from him.
They had. They confirmed they'd received a draft novel from Ioba for their annual writing contest. But, and this is the critical point, it failed the very first stage of assessment. It was immediately rejected and forgotten.
And most importantly,
Kyoani confirmed definitively that its contents had absolutely no similarities whatsoever to any of their published works. None.
so the gap between his delusion and objective reality was huge. Did they give examples of this at the trial?
They did. The prosecution laid out some stark examples to show how tenuous his beliefs were. For instance, he claimed they stole an idea because a scene in his novel had a heroine buying deli dishes at a 50% discount.
And Kyoani had a similar scene.
Not really. A Kyoani work had a character finding meat at a 20% discount. Another claim revolved around school banners. He had banners in his work, and a Kyoani anime had a banner that read, "Swimming Club Advances."
Those aren't similarities. Those are just common life details.
Exactly. They're basic tropes or entirely fabricated parallels in his mind. The motive was a delusion constructed around universal, everyday scenarios.
Despite the horror of his crime, Ioba himself was critically injured. He had severe burns to his legs, chest, face. He was taken to a university hospital in Osaka for extensive surgery.
And this leads to a really unique discussion of medical ethics in the aftermath.
How so?
Well, his treatment became a matter of necessary ethical calculation. His burns were treated using experimental artificial skin. It was the first time this method was used on such extensive burns in Japan.
And why did they choose an experimental method?
The reasoning was deeply considerate of the victims. They used the experimental skin on him so that the very limited supply of available donor human skin could be prioritized entirely for the surviving victims of the attack.
So the survivors could get the established, proven treatments?
Exactly. It must have been an incredibly difficult decision ethically to use any resources on him, but the primary goal was maximizing the recovery of the innocent victims. The medical staff treated him to the highest standard, and he did recover.
By September 2019, his life was no longer in danger.
Correct, though he required continuous rehab. And during that recovery, he regained his speech and reportedly expressed gratitude and even remorse to the hospital staff.
He said they treated him better than anyone ever had.
He did, which suggests a profound lack of positive social contact in his life. But that gratitude didn't change his core delusion. He maintained his claim that Kyoani had stolen his novel, and he told police he fully expected the death penalty.
The legal process then moved forward, but slowly.
Very slowly, because of his recovery. He was formally arrested in May 2020, almost a year after the attack, indicted in December 2020 on murder and other charges.
There was some question about his mental state, whether he'd be found fit to stand trial.
There was speculation about a diminished capacity defense, but the court ultimately found him responsible for his actions. He pled guilty to the charges in September 2023.
And the sentence, when it came in early 2024, reflected the extreme gravity of the crime.
It did. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, and on January 25, 2024, the Kyoto District Court sentenced Shinji Aoba to death. He filed an appeal, but later withdrew it in January 2025, which finalized the sentence. For the families, it was a necessary legal closure.
While that process provided finality, it's only one chapter. We have to look at the aftermath, the resilience, the recovery, and the global support.
The immediate aftermath just speaks volumes about the spirit of Kyoto Animation. Remarkably, just 1 month after the attack, survivors who were physically able began returning to work at Kyoto other studios.
1 month. That is an act of defiance. It's astonishing in the face of that trauma.
The dedication was clear. By October 2019, just a few months later, 27 of the 33 surviving employees were back at work.
It's a powerful message. A refusal to let the perpetrator's goal of obliteration succeed.
And crucially, the company continued its training programs for new animators. They refused to let the pipeline of new talent dry up.
Continuing that program is so key. It signals a future. But of course, the attack caused immediate disruption.
Oh yes, the operational impact was huge. A publicity event for the free, film was canceled, collaborations were delayed, an episode of a currently airing show was postponed. The whole industry needed time.
And the broader industry responded with a lot of sensitivity.
That's a powerful testament to their emotional response. The Studio David production, for instance, they actually modified fire colors and narration in their show Fire Force.
Which is a show all about fire.
Exactly. They did it out of clear respect for the Kyoto victims. It showed a unified sensitivity across the industry.
The outpouring of support, both from Japan and internationally, was historic.
It was unprecedented. Sentai Filmworks, an American licensor, started a GoFundMe that raised over $2.3 million from fans around the world.
And fans found other ways to support them directly.
They did. They bought high-resolution digital images from Kyoto's online store. It was a smart way to get money to the studio directly without needing staff to ship physical goods.
And domestically in Japan, the response was even more overwhelming.
The special bank account Kyoto set up for donations, it accumulated over 3.3 billion yen. That's about $30 million.
And the government's response to that fund was historically significant.
It was. A special measure was passed by the National Diet, Japan's legislature. It was a first in Japanese corporate history.
What did it do?
It allowed all those donations to be tax-exempt. This showed a national recognition of the loss, acknowledging Kyoto as a cultural pillar. The government basically maximized the recovery funds and declared this a disaster of national significance.
And distributing over $30 million must have been incredibly complex.
It was. Kyoto developed a comprehensive ethical plan to distribute the funds. It was based on factors like the severity of injuries and whether a victim was the sole breadwinner for their family. It was handled meticulously.
Beyond the financial aid, this attack served as a critical wake-up call for public safety in Japan.
Absolutely. The ease with which the perpetrator got 40 liters of gasoline prompted immediate national security measures. The Fire and Disaster Management Agency mandated stricter regulations on gasoline sales.
Which were formalized in February 2020.
Right. And now, stations are required to record the buyer's name, address, their stated purpose, and the quantity. It's an attempt to create a paper trail in a moment of scrutiny.
There were local changes, too, for emergency response.
Yes, the Kyoto Municipal Fire Department created new evacuation guidelines, specifically for high-velocity arson events, incorporating lessons learned from the survivors. And police nationwide became far more vigilant about threats against other entertainment companies.
Finally, there's the physical site itself and the complex effort to create a memorial.
Studio One was completely demolished in April 2020. That removed the physical scar, but it raised the question of what should replace it.
President Hada initially suggested a public park, a memorial monument.
He did, but that plan ran into significant local resistance. Residents were worried that a constant stream of visitors and mourners would disrupt the peaceful, residential nature of the neighborhood.
A difficult conflict, the national desire for remembrance versus the local community's need for peace.
It was. And because of that, the official memorial had to be moved.
Where is it finally built?
It's called the Monument Connecting Will, and it was erected in the T and Uji Town Historical Park in Uji City. It was unveiled in July 2024.
And the design itself is deeply symbolic.
It is. The monument features 36 birds flapping their wings. Each bird represents one of the 36 victims. It's a powerful visual way to honor their memory permanently.
When you review everything, the speed and scale of the attack, the perpetrator's warped rationale, and then the incredible unified solidarity from the global community, it's a story of profound devastation met with equally profound resilience.
It is. The enduring response from the industry was remarkable. But the real heart of it all is Kyoto's internal strength. Their decision to prioritize their people's recovery, their refusal to let this define their future by returning to work so quickly, and their commitment to training the next generation. That's a powerful testament to their spirit. It shows creativity can't be extinguished by violence.
Absolutely. Their mission wasn't destroyed. It was, in a way, forged anew.
The long-term challenge, though, remains. This event fundamentally changed how creative studios operate in Japan. The new security measures, the increased vigilance, those are tangible outcomes. But the ongoing question for the creative world is how you balance an open, collaborative environment with the need for protection against lone attackers driven by delusion.
A difficult balance to strike.
It is. This attack forced the entire nation to confront that vulnerability exists, even in what we're seeing as the most peaceful, culturally vital workspaces. And that's the long-term implication that studios everywhere must continue to grapple with.
That is a crucial point for reflection. Thank you for walking us through this extensive and important discussion.
It was necessary to cover these details with care.
Thanks for listening.